Hello and welcome to the latest Catholic Concern for Animals YouTube broadcast. And with us today, I'm very pleased to say we have Vanessa Waddon of Hope Rescue, which is a rescue centre. What kind of animals do you use? Is it just dogs that you deal with, Vanessa, or is it a range of animals?
No, we're purely a dog rescue.
Right. Dog Rescue Centre in Llanharan, which is here in Wales, of course, and we want to talk to Vanessa about puppy farming, about dog factories, and about the particular way that Wales has made a splash on these issues in recent months, a very unwanted one, and why that is and what we can do about it. So welcome, Vanessa. And I start off before we started rolling, because we are, I should say, we are recording this on the 19th of July, on the day when the UK is set to have the hottest day recorded in its history, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A wonderful piece of forward planning by myself, so everybody is really appreciating that. In these kind of circumstances, I mean, with climate change warming up, I mean, that's really got to have an effect on dogs and on companion animals generally. You must face particular problems at the rescue centre dealing with these kind of conditions. So, I mean, what kind of problems do dogs face in this kind of climate?
So obviously the main problem we've got is overheating, making sure that we're keeping them cool enough. It's especially a problem for what we call brachycephalic breeds, so those with flat faces, such as bulldogs, French bulldogs, and sadly we do get a lot of those sorts of breeds coming into our care. So yes, it's always a challenge. Here at the rescue centre, we've got air conditioning units in the kennel blocks. We'll be giving them frozen kongs. We're lucky to have our 18-acre woodland here, which is completely covered with tree cover, so we can take them out early on. And obviously lots of ice lollies for the staff in the freezer as well. So yeah, we do our best, but it is difficult. Yeah,
I can imagine. With respect to, I mean, the reason that I contacted you to invite you on is because you've been involved in a lot of the media in Wales in particular about puppy farming, about dog factories, and about the impact they're having, and particularly what's happening with them post-COVID and with the current economic crisis. I wonder if you could just outline for us how you get involved in all that, and what your role is, and what kind of scope that's involved with you and other rescue organisations around South and West Wales.
So Hope Rescue, I always say that the dogs that come into our care are the lucky ones. They're coming into great facilities, looked after by our wonderful welfare staff, so they're the lucky ones. But what I really want to do at Hope Rescue is I want to reach those dogs that we're never going to meet. How can I improve the lives of those dogs beyond our doors? And obviously puppy farming, as you said, is rife in Wales. It is a problem. We work very closely with local authorities to take in dogs that have been seized from both illegal breeders and low welfare breeders. So for us, it wasn't just a case of continually to take those dogs. We wanted to try and stop those dogs coming in. So we do campaign for tighter breeding laws, as well as caring for those dogs that have been seized. So it's twofold, really. I don't think you can do one without the other. We've got to tackle some of these issues at source. We can't just keep taking excess ex-breeding dogs in.
You say about tackling at source. I mean, that's an interesting thing to say, because why do you think it is that this is on the rise? Why do you think that dog farming has risen so much in recent years in the UK generally? And why has Wales got a particular problem?
I think with Wales, a lot of it is that a lot of it's quite rural. And this goes back to the days of foot and mouth disease. When we had foot and mouth, Welsh Government gave out grants for farmers to diversify, and a lot of them did diversify into dog breeding, unfortunately. So, you know, that goes back quite a long way. But a lot of Wales is rural, so these dogs can be kept in barns and nobody really ever gets to see them, although it is also very much an urban problem right now. Lockdown hasn't helped. Obviously, this huge surge in demand for dogs during lockdown was largely met by low welfare breeders. So that gave an opportunity for them to ply their trade, and also because people couldn't actually visit the premises, they could just drop dogs off at service stations, and it, you know, provided the perfect cover for their illegal and low welfare activity.
And the whole kind of thing about the change in the law, Lucy's Law, as it's called, has been to ensure that people go and have a look at where dogs have been bred, the environment in which they've been brought up, and so on. I mean, is that? It strikes me that buying a companion animal, whether it's dog, kitten, whatever it is, it's an emotional thing. I mean, don't emotions just override all the rationality when you go and see a bunch of puppies? Then, you know, that's a cute thing. Are you really going to be worried about all the environmental things about the parents and so on?
This is the problem. Puppy farm is very much about supply and demand. So in fairness, the puppy farmers are only supplying what the consumers are demanding. And if consumers aren't demanding higher standards, then part of that blame doesn't need to go to them. I think dogs are very much treated as a transaction, as a commodity sometimes. So if they want something, they want it now. A good breeder will have a waiting list of people wanting to buy their puppies. And lots of puppy buyers don't want to wait. They want it now. So they'll overlook, you know, in their head, they know exactly what they should be doing, but they're prepared to put that to one side to get what they want. You know, we've also had reports of where, oh yes, we went, something didn't quite look right, but we felt sorry for the dog, so we rescued it. Well, actually, you haven't really rescued it, because you've taken it out of a situation, but then there'll be more puppies going back into that situation.
Absolutely.
So I think it is very easy for your heart to rule your head, and it's because, like I said, lots of puppy buyers, they want it there and then, and aren't prepared to do their research and try and find a reputable breeder. What we say at Hope Rescues, we're not anti-breeding, we're anti-irresponsible breeding. There is a place for decent breeders who are doing everything right and put the health of the dog above all else. But unfortunately, not everyone is prepared to search and wait for a dog from a reputable breeder.
Because I was thinking about buying a dog a few years ago, and I also went and visited one of the local rescue centres. But when I was looking around, it struck me that buying a dog from a breeder is a very expensive business these days. Does that actually cause problems? I mean, do some people just want to circumvent the expense and go for the cheap option?
I think yes. So again, a decent breeder will price their dogs accordingly. Everything went out the window during COVID. You know, people were paying £3,000 for, say, a cockapoo, which is now probably about 800, 750, 800. The prices have stabilised again. There was a Dachshund breeder in the vets where I was the other day. He had puppies that he was selling for £950. They would have been 4,000 during COVID. So I think price will come into it as well, and that's often where we get when people go on to the free ads and the Gumtree, etc., trying to find a bargain dog. So that certainly does happen.
How many organisations like yours are there? I mean, what kind of area do you cover, and are there other organisations like yours who are, you know, that you kind of work alongside to take in these dogs? Because it strikes me, you know, with any rise like this, that must put tremendous pressure on you and other rescue organisations to suddenly provide the resources to cope with that increase in the demand for your services as a rescue centre.
So at Hope, because we take in seized dogs, there are only basically ourselves and RSPCA that will take in seized dogs. It's very hard because you don't know whether they're going to be signed over. You have to go to court, and we could have these dogs for 7 months, a year. And that creates huge capacity issues. We're actually campaigning at the moment to try and follow the Scottish model, whereby the dogs are signed over after 3 weeks without having to go to court. And we're lobbying Welsh Government to look at bringing that in. There are other rescues that will work directly with breeders to take their surplus stock. That's not something we do. We do work with the local authorities to make sure that those dogs that are being seized at least are being prosecuted and action is taken against them. I think that that's important to us, that that we're part of trying to improve conditions for the dogs that are either left behind if they don't lose their license, or they're stopped from breeding completely because conditions were so poor. So it is hard. Sometimes we get a call to support a local authority with their warrants. They say, oh, it's about 15 dogs. We'll turn up and there's 55 dogs, of which 10 could be pregnant. So that's a challenge. And there are not that many rescue centres that have the capacity that they can deal with that. We're very lucky that we have an amazing team of foster carers who will step in as needed. We don't have capacity at the rescue centre for those sort of numbers. The last 12 months alone, we've taken in 216 seized dogs. We try and get them into foster as soon as we can, though, especially the puppies. Some of them come in nursing mums with pups, some come in pregnant, some come in a very, very poor condition. So we do try and get them straight into foster where we can.
I'd like to talk about foster carers in a moment, but you mentioned a few things there which I think are also important, because an organisation like yours, I mean, you're taking in seized animals. One of the problems there is that actually you don't know the scope of what you're dealing with, not just because the number of animals that's reported to you is may be wrong, but you have animals that are pregnant. So almost, within a very short period of time, the commitment will increase many times because of the birth from the animals that you take in. And in addition, I assume that many of these animals have got considerable health and perhaps trust and mental health problems as well, which you have to cope with. That must take some resourcing and some planning to be able to cope with that.
It does. So if we take a mum in that's pregnant, so we need to foster home from the outset. Once those puppies have whelped and reach about 8 weeks, then we have to start separating them because the court cases generally haven't gone through in that period. So where we needed one foster home, suddenly if they had 8 puppies, we need to separate them into pairs, and I need another 4 foster homes. So that's quite hard as well. And as regards to their health, a good example is we recently took in a seizure of 10 bulldog, 6-month-old bulldogs that were seized. Their health problems were just ridiculous. So it wasn't just their breathing problems. Lots of them had BOAS. They had cherry eye. They had entropia where the eyelashes turn in. They've got conformation problems. So their back ends and their spines aren't right. And on top of that, they all came in with parvo. So yeah, the bill for looking after those dogs, probably £25,000 for those dogs. They were actually signed over, so that bill sits with us. So with seized dogs, up until the point that they are signed over, emergency vet care is covered by the council, then try to reclaim it from the breeder. But once they're signed over, all of those costs then sit with us. So the costs of any vet care that wasn't done during that time, getting them ready for rehoming, so all of their neutering, etc., that all sits with us. So yeah, it's quite an expensive business, but these are the most vulnerable dogs in our local community. It's what we do at Hope Rescue, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
It must be difficult for you to manage, because I mean, you must have massive leaps in the resources that you need to provide in a very short period of time. I mean, have there been periods where you just haven't had the resources to take in animals?
Yeah, there's recently there's a couple of warrants that we weren't able to support. We were asked to, and we had to say, I'm really sorry, we don't have capacity for that. And this is part of the reason why we want to change the legislation in Wales, so the sign-over period is reduced to 3 weeks, because we know that there are potentially warrants that can't be executed because there's nowhere for the seized dogs to go. So the Welsh Government are very, they know it's an issue. They are working with us on it, and we're hoping to see some progress with that.
You mentioned foster carers. I mean, that you talk about kind of like foster carers with respect to society there, and people that have local authorities advertising for foster carers for young children. But companion animals need foster carers as well, dogs and kittens. What do you look for in a foster carer? What does a foster carer need?
So it's very similar to our criteria for adopting. So at Hope, we're very, we don't have lots and lots of rules and regulations. We adopt and foster to people who work, who have young children, who might live in a flat or live in a canal boat. What it's very much about is matching the right dog to the right home. So we look at what you can offer and do we have a dog that matches it. Sometimes if there's lots of things like they've got very young children and a cat and another dog, then we might be limited as to who can go to that. But then actually our puppy farm dogs do suit those environments, so it's not such an issue. So we cover all of the costs while the dog is in foster care. You get 24-hour support from our behaviour team, our foster coordinators. So it's really ideal for people who don't want the commitment of a dog full time. Maybe they like to go away, maybe they can't afford to have their own pet. And this offers them a way of having that companionship. So really, we're looking for people who are up for the challenge, because it is hard saying goodbye to your foster dog. I've got 2 foster dogs right now, both are seized dogs. With the seizures, it's even harder because you don't know whether that dog's going to go back to the breeder. So you might be fostering a dog for 7 months that ultimately has to be returned to the breeder if the council aren't successful for their prosecution, and that takes a certain type of person. We also have our palliative foster care scheme, so that's for dogs that are life limited for whatever reason. So some of them might only have 2 weeks left, some might have 6 months left, and they go into our palliative scheme, and that really takes a special kind of foster carer to take in a life limited dog.
So almost like at home dog hospice.
It is, yeah, very much like a hospice at home scenario.
And if anybody's watching this and they kind of feel they would like to foster companion animals, I mean, are you looking for foster carers, and how would they go about becoming one?
So most rescues do use foster homes, and I know at the moment rescue centres are under crisis right now. The huge increase in dogs bought during lockdown, the cost of living crisis. We're all looking at how we can help more pets, but we can't bring them onto site. So I know that every rescue is crying out for foster homes. So contact your local rescue. With us, it's quite simple. You go onto the website, there's a form to fill in, and then we'll give you a ring to discuss your application. We only foster our dogs from a certain radius because they have to be able to go to our local vets, and they have to come to the centres and have to do the meets and for the doctors to meet the dogs. So we are basically in South Wales, but what we would say, if anybody, wherever you are, please do get in contact with your local rescue. We know that they would really welcome your support.
Chris, have you got anything that you want to add at this stage?
Well, just to say, sort of the work that is done in this sort of work is absolutely incredibly important, and you know, the amount of companion animals, and we're talking about dogs here, the amount of companion animals that are missold, if you can use that expression, mistreated, and end up in sanctuaries and rescue centres is enormous, absolutely enormous. But as was being said, there are many, many more that never reach sanctuaries or rescue centres, it's I think you put your finger on it at one point, Gerald. It is an emotional purchase, and the word purchase just gives it away. We're buying and selling animals here, you know, in the majority of cases, you know, buying and selling. And now we made it illegal to buy and sell humans. It still happens. We still have human trafficking. We've made that illegal, but we don't make it illegal to buy and sell as a commodity. And that was a word that was used, as a commodity, other sentient creatures like dogs. And indeed, you know, that they become property of the human. You know, they're property. And then, you know, there are animal welfare laws, obviously, in the UK better than elsewhere in lots of cases, but they are still property, treated as property. So I'd like to make that point first. These are creatures that become property to be bought and sold at whim, which is what we're talking about here, at whim and for profit. You know, we're talking about, oh, under COVID, animals worth this amount, now it's worth that amount, you know, because of supply and demand economics. I mean, you know, we're talking of these creatures as if if you were buying a car or buying a new sofa or a new TV or whatever it was. and sometimes we need to make that point crystal clear to people. I mean, you know, we actually, as an organisation, don't advise anyone, and this is our view, of course, and views are different. We advise if you want to get a companion animal, get it from a rescue centre or get it from a sanctuary. Don't use a breeder. Now, that's not to say all breeders are the same, and we've heard that there are good and there are bad breeders. But I take a position anyway on these things that, you know, if you want a companion animal, and many people do, go and get it from a rescue centre or a sanctuary. That's where you should get your animal from. And obviously, you know, the worst excesses we hear about people buying animals on the internet unseen, you know, like you would buy a book from Amazon or whatever it happens to be. Awful, you know. I mean, obviously they don't come with a guy with it, you know, knocking on your door with delivery every day, like, you know, you get your Amazon books or whatever it is. But it's the same sort of principle. And obviously we're talking about South Wales here, where there's obviously a problem, as is a problem elsewhere. But, you know, there's long been a problem as well in Eastern and Central Europe, a massive problem with puppy farms and people buying and selling and picking your dog, or go up at a local service station from a guy in the back of his van. You know, it's been like Del Boy. You know, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. So the work that is being done by sanctuaries and rescue centres is absolutely phenomenal. But again, it's only, as we've said, probably helping and saving a fraction of the dogs that are in need. So from our perspective, and we tend to be sometimes a bit more out there, a bit more radical than perhaps other organisations. We said, if you want a companion animal, great, but the companion, it's a two-way process, isn't it? We don't, it's not a property process. We all know that people buy these things, or some people buy animals as some sort of I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. I've lost the word I'm looking for. Status symbol. Oh, look what I've got on my lead. You know, I mean, it's awful that people do. So that's sort of general points from me rather than specific points. Yeah. That's my initial reaction, Gerald, to the question. Any immediate views?
Well, I want to pick up on a few of those things actually, Chris, because I think they're very important things. And I mean, one of the things which I think we do tend to neglect, and I'd be interested in your views on this, Vanessa. I mean, is that a relationship with a companion, with a dog, with a cat. It is a two-way process. We tend to think of it, I mean, as a property relationship. But if you're really going to have a good relationship with a dog, then it is a two-way thing. It is not. It's not something where you impose your will upon the dog. I mean, obviously, there is a relationship there in terms of training the dog and things of that nature. But the dog is part of this and giving its personality and its character to that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And these are the things you've got to think about before you make that purchase, before you purchase your dog. Can you give that dog everything that it needs? Can you afford its vet bills? My own dog has just been over to Langford to have spinal surgery. Thankfully, she's insured because it was £5,500. Make sure that you're prepared for those eventualities. You can give that dog everything it needs. Have you got the time for that dog? Have you chosen the right breed for your circumstances? Because that's something that happens. A lot of people actually make a mistake and don't choose the right breed. It's not just a case of going to the wrong breeder or not looking at a rescue. They just want any dog, so they'll go up the farm and buy a collie, and then they go out to work all day, and it's nipping the children, and that was just the wrong choice of dogs. There's an awful lot to think about before you even bring a pet dog into your home, and people just don't spend that time thinking about it. Sadly, sometimes they treat it as if it's a mobile phone, and that one doesn't work anymore, that one can go, I'll get another one. Literally treating them like, as Chris said, like a commodity, as if they would a piece of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things which strikes me, kind of wandering around, is that many people around here have dogs. I mean, particularly a while back, there was a big thing for huskies and husky related dogs, and those dogs need a lot of exercise. You know, they don't cope well with being cooped up and only being taken out on a lead once or twice a day. I mean, they need a lot of exercise, and I don't think people often look at their circumstances. I mean, one of the problems with me is I don't get around very easily nowadays. So, I mean, you know, having a dog which needed long walks, I couldn't do it. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't pursue the companion animal that I wanted. But I think it is very important that people consider the needs of the animal in this relationship. Well, the thing I wanted to pick up.
Some people will look at aesthetics only. Some people look at aesthetics only. So a husky puppy is very cute. A collie puppy is very cute. They just look at how cute it is as a puppy. Mm.
That's one of the things I wanted to actually come back on, because Chris was talking about status symbols and fashion, and you only have to go on something like Instagram to see influencers with these small dogs who often are bred in a way which has health problems in and of itself. And then people want that kind of dog, not recognizing that the breed has health issues, not recognizing that it has particular needs, you know, thinking that they can treat it just like what they see on Instagram and as something which is a fashion thing, and that's something which some of the breeders you've been involved with have actually done, which has brought in small fortunes for them, which has brought in a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of pounds in very short periods of time.
Yeah, so unfortunately, social media plays a large part in the huge increase in ear crop dogs that we're seeing at the moment. Yeah. So pocket bullies, American bullies, XL bullies. We had a seizure of 7 puppies, of which 5 were ear cropped. That went to court and the breeder was prosecuted. But you know, a lot of that is to do with social media and influencers. And unfortunately, there are lots of celebrities that have bought ear cropped dogs. Nicola Adams, for example, Jack Fincham from Love Island, even Marcus Rashford has got an ear cropped dog. So people are seeing their Instagram pages, millions of followers, thinking, oh, that looks like a cool dog. And it's actually illegal to ear crop in this country. However, it is legal to import, and a lot of the ear cropping that's going on in the UK is being done under the smokescreen of illegal imports. So that caused a huge problem. We've got the same problem with brachycephalic breeds, as I've said, those that struggle to breathe and are prone to lots and lots of different health issues. You know, we've had dogs in our care that have been worth £30,000-40,000 to these breeders. Huge money to be made from it.
Yeah, and even if you're not breeding, you know, kind of the specialist dogs, the fashionable dogs, you can still make quite a bit of money breeding dogs in a relatively short period of time. I mean, if you're in the valleys on benefits, I mean, it must be a real temptation to just set up a puppy farm, dog factory in your backyard to the extent you can get away with it, and just rake in the money, because you can make a lot of money in a very short period of time.
You can, and the penalties, if you're caught, are so low that it's worth the risk.
Yeah,
you know, we are worried now with the cost of living crisis. We're really hoping that people aren't going to think this is an easy way to earn some additional money, because the market has fallen and there might not be the demand for those dogs now. Hopefully, you know, we're hoping that, you know, from the cost of living perspective, that's one good thing, is hopefully that demand will really reduce. But no, it is tempting, you know, from one litter, even if you're selling the puppies for 800 each, you could have 6 puppies. If there are no problems with the delivery, you don't need a C-section or anything, you know, you could be talking about £4,000 or £5,000 profit. You have 2 dogs, which means you only, the threshold for breeding is 3 litters or more. You know, that's almost what, £8,000-10,000 you could earn. It's very tempting for people, sadly, and we do have a real problem now with urban breeding. We call it the puppy farmer next door, where people are just setting themselves up as illegal breeders from home.
And as you said, I mean, the chances of being caught are not, I mean, it's not 100% you're going to get caught anyway. And if you do, you get fined, and the fines you get probably do not represent a fraction of the profits that you've already made. No,
that's right. So investigations are up. So the RSPCA did a report recently that said in Wales they're up by 63%. That's because a lot of extra resources have gone into the local authority enforcement project. So there are extra resources going into it. It's quite hard to prove. A lot of the selling goes on in closed Facebook groups online, so it's quite actually hard to prove what you're selling, how much money you're making. And then when they do get caught, as you said, unless there's real welfare issues, and obviously the sentencing has now gone up, that you increase sentencing where you can actually get up to 5 years. But if it's just a case of straightforward illegal breeding, the penalties are hardly anything. So it's worth you taking the risk, really, of being found out, and that's what people are choosing to do. The amount of money they've made up until that point probably pays their mortgage off, buys their car. So it was worth it for them.
Yeah, and absolutely.
This I can come in here is one of the points I was alluding to earlier, and it's not only the case in this area of animal welfare. There are lots of other examples where organisations such as ours and others work, and such as the Sanctuary, work for a long time trying to get improved legislation, trying to get better safety in law for animals, and then the enforcement on the other side of the equation is really hardly of any use. And that's because the legislation's either badly drawn, the penalties are not enough, the enforcement capability is not there. So it's really, this is why we try to say, you know, people have to take responsibilities for, like, not buying from breeders, for example, because if somebody, and it doesn't only apply to animal welfare, of course, it applies to all sorts of things. If somebody sees the penalty for what they're doing, if it's illegal, even worse, but they see the penalty even to get caught and prosecuted isn't going to deter them, then the law's not really worth the letter it's written on. And we have a lot of this in animal welfare work, not only in the area here we're talking about. The penalties for being found out, which again is often not that easy to find the people who break the law, then to be prosecuted successfully, and then the penalty on top of that isn't a deterrent. The deterrents are not enough. And this is an example we're hearing here, that even if people are found out, they're illegal, they're prosecuted, they're fined, it's not going to deter them because the profits they've made outweigh the deterrent of being caught and prosecuted. And this is a real problem we have in animal welfare generally. But I just thought I'd make that point because specifically hearing about it in these cases.
No, you're right, Chris. It's a real problem. We were involved going back to 2019 in a TV programme with BBC Wales Investigates, which went undercover into licensed puppy farms. So these were legal breeders, horrific conditions. We took out a little cavalier who was handed over to the organisation that was working with the BBC, and they've got the dog out. We took it in. She had a dead puppy stuck in her birth canal. So if they weren't doing the filming, that dog would have just died in that place. And that's a licensed puppy farm. So the good thing about that programme is that it did lead to a breeding review in Wales. So there was a review then in 2020, which led to some changes in legislation. There were 55 recommendations made from that breeding review, but nowhere near all of them were implemented. And we're still calling on, specifically, we want to see improved traceability. So we want to see all breeders licensed. not just those that are breeding 3 or more. We need to know where those breeders are, because that's half the problem at the moment. We don't know where they are. Unless someone reports them, we don't know. As you can say, they can just keep getting away with it. So licensing for all breeders. We want to see a cap on the number of breeding bitches, pups and stud dogs that can be housed at any one site. We can't see these barns that have 200 dogs in. You cannot care for 200 dogs properly. When we get a seizure in, we've got pregnant dogs, young pups, dogs in poor condition, the amount of resource that's needed to care for those dogs is off the charts. There is no way that these breeders can care for 200 dogs at one time. And we also want to make sure that that includes pups and stud dogs. So the current legislation, you have to have a ratio of 1 member of staff for every 20 dogs, but that only includes the bitches. If each of those bitches has got 5 puppies as well, that's another 100 dogs. They might have another 30 or 40 stud dogs on that site. So that ratio is just a farce, really. We want to bring that ratio right down, but also make sure that within that head count, it includes the puppies that are on site at that time, it includes the stud dogs. And we also want to see vet certified annual fitness to breed certificates for every single dog. So where you've got those dogs that do have conformation problems, those brachycephalic breeds that really should not be breeding, that they have to be vet certified. So that's just some of the things that we'd like to see that might help. There's still a very, very long way to go. Welsh Government has recognised the enforcement issues. They put money into a 3-year local authority enforcement project, and that's a dedicated team to look at enforcement. And it's that particular team that we have been working with on the recent seizures. So they are making inroads, but there's still a lot of illegal breeding going out there. They're not going to have the resources to tackle every single illegal breeder. It is a mammoth problem for us here in Wales.
Yeah, and this is the point I was making earlier, and this, I hate to use this expression, but it brings it back to the discussion that the animals are just property. But on this supply, the old-fashioned supply and demand side of things, here we're talking about trying to address the supply of the animals and make them the people who supplying the animals be more responsible through law. And again, I'm saying we also need to say to the public, the demand side, you shouldn't, you should be much more careful about where you get your animals from. Take more time in, choosing your companion, as Gerald would say. And the problem is, people want it now. We used to have this thing, didn't we, in Britain anyway? A dog is not just for Christmas, where we used to hear about people getting dogs for Christmas and discarding the dog by the early parts of January. This idea that it's a nice cute puppy that'll we need to really work on the general public as well somehow. And that's
you're right, Chris. When we do a campaign, we've always got 3 levels. First of all, we look at raising awareness of the issue, then we look at behaviour change, and then we look at changing legislation. So it's really important that any of our campaign work addresses all those 3 different levels. So we're not just trying to change the legislation, we're trying to change people's behaviour. I think we have to some degree. I think the fact that reports of illegal breeders, investigations have risen so much is because people are reporting. So if they see something that's not right, they're actually saying, well, I don't think that's right, I'm going to report that. I've seen my neighbour coming back and forth with puppies, that's not right, I'm going to report. So I think from the awareness point of view, I think we've done a good job. The behaviour change is a lot more difficult because people, even though they know what they've got to do, there is so much out there. The RSPCA has got a fantastic resource, the puppy contract, which tells you how to spot illegal breeders, how to spot low welfare breeders, what you should be asking, what questions you should be asking. So even when they're armed with that information, they're still prepared to put that to one side to get what they want and to get it quickly. And that's the problem that we've got.
Absolutely. And I find it ironic sometimes, because Britain prides itself allegedly as we call ourselves as a country a country of animal lovers. Well, and I always say, well, it might refer to companion animals, if at all. It certainly doesn't refer to any other sort of animal. But companion animals, you can, we love our animals, cats and dogs. But here we talk about all the problems in one species that we're supposed to love as a country. And we hear about all the problems on just one species of the animals that are most loved in Britain. And we're hearing about how people make enormous profits out of them, don't look after the animals that they're making their money from when they've got them. And it's and as you rightly say, though, you know, the work that people like yourself do, and the other organisations, the other animal welfare organisations, and things like BBC exposures, they are really, really critical. But it's an enormous problem, isn't it?
It is, and you know, we can only keep going, trying to raise awareness, trying to get that behaviour change in, trying to improve the legislation. But I just think it's such a huge issue that we're never going to tackle it fully. It's just so widespread.
I just want to talk about enforcement for a little bit, because you mentioned local authorities, you mentioned the RSPCA, and of course the police are also a big part of enforcement, because they are the people who really have the powers to go and do anything. It must be enormously difficult coordinating enforcement with respect to, I mean, you see it from a particular perspective, obviously, because you are taking in the animals, you're not responsible for the enforcement, but it must be enormously difficult for to coordinate disparate organisations like this with different agendas with respect to these kind of seizures.
I don't think people really understand what it takes to get a warrant. Lots of people are critical of the RSPCA, critical of local authorities. We feed intelligence into them, and we do work quite closely with them on that. I don't think they understand how much intelligence you actually need and the type of evidence. Just someone giving an anonymous phone call, I think so and so is breeding. That's not evidence. That's not what they need. They need evidence of poorly puppies being purchased. They need evidence of more than 3 litters being bred in a year, and they've also got to do it on a risk-based approach, because they haven't got the resources to investigate every single one. So they will prioritise those where there are welfare issues, like crop tears, like poor conditions. And I don't think anyone, unless you've worked with the enforcement agencies, I don't think they appreciate how hard it is to do that. RSPCA can't just rock up and go into a house. They have to get a warrant. The police has to be there. They have to get a vet to sign off a seizure. The same for local authorities. It's not just a case of having a complaint and rocking up. And then you need the resources to go to court. And you'll need a barrister and all of those costs. So they've got to make sure that they really have got a strong case when it comes to the prosecution. And you know, part of what they're trying to do is to raise standards. So it might not always be a case that they're going to go in and seize dogs. It might be that they just go in and issue some advice, and they're trying to bring up some of these breeders to the right standards. You know, some are way past that and are never ever going. They're either illegal or they will never ever meet the standards that are needed. So they're not just doing enforcement that leads in prosecutions, they're also trying to raise standards as well. Local authorities are under huge pressure. Social services are under pressure. Housing departments are under pressure. Education departments are under pressure. And then trying to get animal welfare somewhere on that ladder of priorities as well. It's always going to be difficult. And I think, yeah, I always despair when I see the public, you know, really having to go on social media at the RSPCA. They really do not know how hard it is to secure a prosecution.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and as well as that, the kind of resources that are available to the state actors in this, because they have been under a squeeze for a long time now, and are likely to be under another one going into the future with respect to the economic crisis that we're in, and you know, people I think have got to realise that if we want, you know, local authorities, want the police, want these kind of organisations to have the resources to tackle these issues, then we've got to be prepared to commit to that as a society.
Well, that's a very, you know, again, we're looking on the enforcement side here, and again, not only in companion animals, and we're talking specifically of the United Kingdom here, and more particularly Wales, but not only in the companion animals issue. And as somebody who used to write or help write animal welfare charters for local government, you know, the actual difficulty of you know, and I remember when we first started writing animal welfare charters, there was very few local government, local authorities that had them, and it came as a real thing. So you need, where's your animal welfare charter? What do you mean animal welfare? We haven't got anything like that. You know, this is not that long ago. not that long ago. I remember writing these things, not that far back in time. And so then you had to, you know, get them through a local authority, and then, but then again, the local authority staff had responsibility for those charters, like probably 1 or 2 people, you know, 1 or 2 people somewhere in the environmental department responsible for making that, if eventually we got a charter passed by the council, to enforce it. You know, so the resources needed to, whether it is in local authority, whether it's in charities like the RSPCA, whether it's in the police force, wherever it is, there's always a limited amount of staff they can give to actually do the enforcement. So that's what I'm saying. However great your laws can be, what the laws aren't enough anyway. So you spend a lot of time getting improved laws, and then when they're actually passed, getting them enforced is also enormously difficult. So that's why I also say we need to get the public to understand their responsibility before they purchase and after they purchased an animal, what their responsibilities to those animals are. And it should be relatively easy for us in this animal loving country compared to some others, but it's still a massive problem. And so again, the amount, you know, the sort of work that Vanessa, that you do and your organisation is absolutely important and critical going forward. So unfortunately, you're always going to be needed. That's the problem.
Yeah, we are, and I think you know, the problem with local authorities is a lot of it does sit in licensing. So somebody might be licensing a dog breeder, and they might be licensing a takeaway or a taxi driver. It's those specialist skills. And in fairness, Welsh Government did recognise this when they did the dog breeding review. The local authority enforcement project was about setting up a dedicated team of experienced staff that were experienced in animal welfare, and then trying to have a centralised team that could then go out and train other local authority licensing officers and to equip them with the skills, because, you know, it was noted that there just isn't the skill set in local authorities to really tackle this properly. You know, it needs skilled and experienced animal welfare staff, not someone who's licensing a taxi or a takeaway the same day.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that strikes me about all of this is that it really does come back to, you know, people's relationships with animals and people's, because we talked about how obtaining an animal is so much an emotional thing, and the relationship you have with animals in your life is also an emotional thing. It's not just a commodity relationship, and you're going to get so much more from any animal in your life if you invest that kindness, that awareness in your animal. If you treat the animal as something which it will develop in itself and which you can help develop, then that will actually add to your relationship with it and to what you get out of that having that animal around. And I think that's what's missing in all this, in terms of the way in which people approach obtaining dogs and where they're prepared to go to obtain dogs. Because if they think about the animal first rather than themselves first, they will get more from that relationship.
Absolutely, and that's what we say when we try and match adopters and dogs. Rescues will often get criticised for, oh, you haven't, you know, you've got lots of dogs at the centre, but you won't go home to me. It's like, because it's not in the dog's interest. The home you're offering isn't what the dog needs. We're not here to find a rescue dog for everyone who wants one. Our role is to find the best possible home for the dogs that are in our care. They are the most important thing, and finding them the right home is what we are here to do. And there's been a lot of criticism on rescues recently about they're too stringent, or I've applied to 10 rescues and I can't get a rescue dog. That's because most people coming to us want a dog that's good for children, they can leave for a couple of hours, and they can take down the park and be let off lead. We don't get perfect dogs like that in that often. And when we do, we might have 500 applications. That's 499 people who are going to be disappointed. It's not our fault. If you want a rescue dog, and we really hope people do, then you're going to have to, like going to a good breeder, you're going to have to wait for the right dog to come up. And if you've got specific circumstances, like very young children, there will be the right dog for you, but you're going to have to wait. And again, we're back to that that transaction, aren't we, where people don't want to wait. They want to go and buy it, and they want to buy it now. And that's the problem that we see with rescues a lot. So our hardest to home dogs won't get any applications. And then our puppy farm dogs that we've got at the moment, which are cockapoos, dachshunds, poodles, you can imagine we're receiving 500 applications for every single one of those. And so, yeah, kind of, you understand it, but it's kind of heartbreaking for the dogs that then don't get a look in at all. The bull breeds and the lurchers, it's a little bit harder for them and harder for us to see that.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. That's been terrific. Thank you very much for the time you spent with us. Is there anything that you want to add? Do you want to talk about with respect to the work you do, which we haven't covered?
No, I think it's covered. Really appreciate the call out for foster homes. Like I've said, rescues across the UK. Anyone listening to this that's thinking about fostering, please do. It is so rewarding. It's hard saying goodbye, but the way I always look at it is, as soon as that dog's gone to its new home, I've got space for the next one, and there's always the next one. And like Chris said, if you are looking for a new pet, check out your local rescue centres first. You might have to wait for a little bit, but it's so rewarding, and you're doing a very, very good thing.
I must admit, I'm tempted to drop you a line myself, Vanessa, but I think I'd have to have a conversation with the wife before I did that. But
when you're ready, please do.
Okay, I'll certainly bear it in mind. Thanks very much for that, Vanessa. Really great to have you on at a time when this issue is so important, is becoming so crucial, and let's hope that it doesn't become an even bigger issue than it has been now with COVID and with the current economic environment that exists. So great to have you aboard. Great to have you here and spend your time with us. And thank you again for watching our YouTube offerings. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope it actually makes you consider what the issues are with respect to organisations like Hope Rescue and to the nature of puppy farming and of dog factories. And if you see any suspicious behaviour out there, then report it. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay.